Galactic Standard Time 1300. The Senate Hall of the Cavor Empire buzzed with electric pomp, a place built to inspire awe and submission. 63 meters high, lined with synth marble and alloy filigree, its ceiling shimmered like the surface of a diamond ocean. Alien delegates lounged in their gravity-defiant thrones, eyes shifting as the entrance doors yawned open. In stepped a human. He wasn't dressed in tactical armor, no ceremonial garb. Just a gray blazer, scuffed leather shoes, and a plaid tie that looked like it had survived both a washing machine and an existential crisis. Ambassador Dwight Dewey Collins walked with a certain Midwestern optimism, the kind only found in American dads who believe everything can be fixed with duct tape, a firm handshake, and a hot cup of diner coffee, which he held steaming in a dented travel mug that read, "Liberty One Dad of Earth." The Senate stared. Not in fear, in amusement. A fish-skinned Drex ambassador elbowed his neighbor. "Is that their war leader? He's wrinkled and leaky." The neighbor, a crystalline Zillari, tilted its multifaceted head. "That appears to be steam. Or perhaps a mating signal?" Dewey paused before the supreme podium, cleared his throat, and adjusted his glasses. The translator badge on his lapel flickered to life. "Honored representatives of the Cavor Empire," he began, smiling warmly. "I come in peace on behalf of the United Terran Accord to renegotiate the border clause under Treaty 17A, Section 4, Paragraph 20. The translation software, underprepared for Midwestern cadence, broadcast something closer to, "Grease your pods, stink beasts. I bring fire to the toenails of your bloated ancestors." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some delegates ducked. A squelching minister of hydraulics fainted backward into its nutrient vat. Dewey blinked. "Huh. Bit touchy, aren't they?" The insectoid war master, General Kshnak, let out a rasping chitter. "Earth sends jokes to a war table. We should have sterilized your mudball when we had the chance." A few others nodded. Murmurs of primate buffoon and galactic backwater swirled. The Supreme Chancellor, a six-armed Vorthian with glowing antennae and a neck ring made of conquered planets' minerals, leaned forward with a smirk that would have curdled yogurt. "You are alone, Earthling? No battalion? No telepathic warden? No psychic deterrent protocol?" Dewey took a long sip from his mug. "Nope. Just me and my arthritis. But don't worry, I've got backup." Snickers echoed like neural pulses across the chamber. The Chancellor laughed. "And what might this backup be? Another collection of your planet's ridiculous vinyl sound discs?" "Nope," Dewey said, eyes still soft, voice still casual. "Just a guy. He's probably walking in now." The Senate turned toward the entrance, not with apprehension but mild curiosity. Perhaps expecting another oddity, maybe a robot, or worse, a guitar. But the doors opened again, and this time silence entered. The man didn't stomp, he didn't float. He simply walked, boots scuffing lightly against the polished floor. Military? Maybe once, not anymore. Dressed in faded jeans and a jacket stained by dust, blood, or barbecue sauce, it was hard to tell. A pair of dark aviator sunglasses masked his eyes, though they seemed to slice through the room regardless. A low hum followed him, untraceable, somewhere between dread and reverence. He carried no weapons, none visible. The galactic delegates suddenly became aware of their bodies, heart rates, gill function, cloacal control. Something in the air had shifted. The insectoid war master stood again. "Identify." The man said nothing. He stood behind Dewey perfectly still, like a shadow with a pulse. Dewey didn't turn around. "That's Jake." Another pause. Then, laughter, unsure and uncomfortable. "Jake?" the Chancellor repeated, as if the word itself were offensive. "And what is Jake? Another diplomat?" "Nah," Dewey replied, casually rolling his shoulders. "Jake's, What we call an apex predator. Your apex predator brings no weapons. He doesn't need them. The Chancellor leaned back. He's your threat? Dewey smiled. He's not a threat. He's a consequence. The hall's air filtration system hiccuped. Several delegates fidgeted with their communication nodes. One of them, a squid-like Gorlaxian, nervously pulled up data from the central threat matrix. Within moments, Jake's biometric reading was identified. Reluctantly, red glyphs flickered on their personal HUDs. Unquantifiable, uncontrollable, unreasoned. The threat matrix labeled him Apex Class Anomaly, Origin, Earth. Codename, Ghost Beast. The Chancellor's smile faltered. There must be an error. One brave delegate piped up. I heard about him. Took down a mercenary war. Squad with a camping fork. Another whispered. Vaporized a battle drone by staring at it. No, croaked a third. He fed it chili. The drone self-deleted. Jake remained unmoving, sunglasses catching the light just enough to suggest irritation. Dewey held up a small data chip between his fingers. I brought updated Earth terms. We'd like full control over the disputed zone and, access to your entertainment archive. Jake's trying to finish an old sitcom. Something about a detective who talks to a car. The Chancellor glared. You presume victory in a room you do not control. I presume nothing, Dewey said calmly. I'm just offering you a choice, Schnack hissed. We are not intimidated by... Jake moved. Barely. He scratched his beard, but the motion was enough. Half the Senate flinched. One of them screamed. Another fainted. A small robotic aide tried to upload itself into a ceiling vent. The insectoid War Master bared mandibles. I demand proof of this human's status. Dewey turned his head slightly. Jake? Jake slowly reached into his jacket. Instantly, force fields activated. Defense grids warmed up. Several alien guards drew pulsating weapons. Jake pulled out a stick of beef jerky. He tore it in half, gave one piece to Dewey, and bit into the other. Loudly. I don't think he likes being doubted, Dewey said, chewing thoughtfully. The Chancellor's composure began to erode. This is absurd. He's a myth, a fabrication, a boogeyman. Yeah, Dewey replied. That's what we thought about the microwave once. Now look at us, hot pockets in 2 minutes. The joke landed like a lead balloon. But Jake chuckled. Just once. A short, low sound like a predator breathing near your neck. It was enough to send one ambassador's translator node into overdrive. Sparks flew. Kishnak tried one last show of dominance. He lunged forward, slamming a clawed fist on the dais. I will not be mocked by mammals. Jake stepped forward. Just one step. The chamber dimmed. Not because of any system failure, but because every alien in the room collectively stopped breathing. Jake spoke. 3 words. The first and only in that session. Try me, bug. A moment of stillness stretched long. Dewey nodded. He usually lets me do the talking. But hey, sometimes the man just needs to express himself. Schnack stepped back. No growl, no protest, only silence. The Chancellor's voice trembled slightly. We shall review your terms. Deliberate with urgency. Appreciated, Dewey said, already sipping his coffee again. Jake doesn't like repeating himself. Jake returned to his position behind Dewey, folding his arms. The council erupted into hushed whispers and chaotic murmurs, but none dared speak directly to the humans again. Not yet. Outside the chamber, security logs flagged 39 anomalies, biometric failures, psychic fractures. 3 guard bots self-destructed due to stress pattern inconsistencies. Inside, the Earth ambassador looked at his coffee mug, frowned. Should have brought more sugar. Jake remained silent, chewing slowly. Dewey sighed. Next time, he muttered, I'm bringing a thermos for both of us. Behind them, 64 alien species reassessed what they thought they knew about humanity, and the quiet man in the sunglasses kept watching. 16 hours later, aboard the Cavor Empire's orbital dreadnought Vengeance of Order, the true conflict ignited. Not with an attack, but with a signature. A digital scroll signed by the Cavor Chancellor, enacted beneath the illusion of diplomacy, authorized Operation Purge Needle. Coded in layered encryption, masked behind civilian transit records, the orders were clear. Neutralize all Terran medical personnel stationed within Cavor-held border colonies. No warnings, no trials, no survivors. On Station IRIX 9, a humanitarian vessel turned clinic operated under the United Terran Accords Medical Corps. There were no soldiers on board, only doctors, surgeons, technicians, and nurses, volunteers, dispatched after the Treaty 17A clauses had opened provisional cooperation zones. They had set up blood banks and surgery units, repaired neural damage in wounded Cavor soldiers, even helped suppress viral mutations in native ecosystems. The humans called it peace-building. The Empire called it infiltration. They came at midnight, Cavor time. 6 armored dropships, 24 silent soldiers, and a command AI programmed with no tolerance for mercy. The first entry breach ruptured oxygen seals. The second disabled life support protocols. The third squad moved room to room with stun pikes and nerve disruptors. By the time emergency beacons were activated, all channels had been jammed. The clinic, home to 82 Terran medics, was nothing but a dark tomb by dawn. The attack wasn't broadcast. No news report carried it. The Empire wiped the digital residue, sealed internal logs, and moved on. But they missed one thing: a name. Survivor listed. E. Maddox, Civ class. Status: unknown. Back on Earth, in a secure compound deep within the Nevada desert, Ambassador Collins stood in a scorched concrete courtyard, holding the report. His usual warmth was gone. He didn't sip from his mug. He didn't crack a joke. His fingers gripped the paper with uncharacteristic tension. Jake read the report beside him, eyes scanning silently, muscles carved from a dozen wars tightening beneath his jacket. When he reached the casualty list, he stopped. "Eleanor," he said. Collins nodded. "She was on IRIX 9 with her team." Jake didn't answer. He just stared at the burned-in photo of the station, a dull black splotch in the void. "I don't think they knew," Collins muttered. Jake tilted his head. "They killed the wrong people. Medics, volunteers, kids. One of them graduated 2 months ago." Jake's jaw flexed. Collins looked down. "You warned me. You said the Empire's smiles were just another way to bare teeth." Jake turned away, speaking without facing him. "They think we'll make speeches." "We always do." "They think we'll appeal." "We usually try." "They think this ends in a tribunal." Jake looked up at the horizon. It doesn't. 3 hours later, black files were decrypted. Redacted names were unredacted. A door labeled Protocol 13, sealed, since the old Earth Wars, was unlocked by 3 separate authorization keys. Its contents weren't weapons. They were coordinates, locations of men who no longer existed on official records. Men buried under false identities, locked away in penal orbitals, cryochambers, or psychological null zones. Each file bore the same tag: war crimes, humanity's own. They were the monsters Earth buried to prove it had evolved. Now Earth was ready to unbury them. 6 men. Each one a sentence, not a name. Each one shaped by battles that made the Empire's conflicts look like drills. Some had been forgotten willingly, others reluctantly. But all of them had one thing in common. They had once been heroes. Then they became something else. First was Damian Creed. Once a tactician for the Alaskan Tundra Wars, later court-martialed for unleashing geokinetic quakes that caused civilian tsunamis. His intellect was never in doubt. His restraint, always. Second, Raphael Quinn, an ex-Black Ops medic who rewrote battlefield triage by fusing cybernetic shock stim tech into living tissue during active combat. His nickname, the Surgeon of Screams. He preferred not to be found. Unfortunately for him, Jake knew exactly where he slept. Third, Solomon Briggs. The ex-colonial governor turned warlord during the Martian collapse. He held a city of 4 million hostage to force emergency relief shipments to the outer rings. He also kept the peace for 12 straight years after. His methods? Non-negotiable. Fourth, Luther Kane, former Navy SEAL, later fired into orbit without a suit. Survived. When he returned, he dismantled an entire orbital command structure with a spoon and 0 oxygen. His psychiatric profile was banned from analysis. AI refused to process it. Fifth, Miles Richter. A sniper so precise he once fired a round through 7 kilometers of shifting wind and hit a pirate king's breathing tube during mid-inhalation. He didn't miss. He also didn't speak. And sixth, already awake, already moving, was Jake. They weren't friends. They weren't even allies. They were pieces of a puzzle no one dared assemble. But when Collins handed Jake the folder titled Retribution Assets, Emergency Protocol, he didn't need to speak. The names said everything. Jake left the compound 2 hours later. No convoy, no aircraft. Just a steel case, his boots, and the coordinates burned into his neural HUD. He found Damian Creed in the Arctic Rift, beneath a fractured science dome once converted into an autonomous prison. The guards had frozen long ago. Creed, perfectly, preserved in a cryocell, opened his eyes before the system finished booting. "I thought I was supposed to rot," he muttered. Jake tossed the file onto the floor. Creed read the first line and smiled. So they finally broke something that mattered. "Medics," Jake said. Creed stood without another word. Jake moved to the Martian dry zones next, inside a derelict terraformer buried beneath sand and metal. Quinn was rebuilding a spine, his own. He grunted when Jake approached. "You're late." "You weren't invited." Quinn smiled. "Good. I hate pleasantries." By the time Jake gathered the 6, the atmosphere in the Nevada compound had changed. Generals whispered in corners. AI satellites began predicting engagement zones. The Cavor Empire's intel agencies caught signals, triangulated rogue pulses, and dismissed them, assuming they were underground cells or smuggler factions. They didn't consider Earth would deploy its monsters, because no one, not even Earth, should have dared. Collins watched the 6 men gather in the same hangar where orbital drops were launched during the final siege of Europa. He didn't address them like soldiers. He didn't give a speech. He just handed them an item: dog tags. Each one belonged to the medics killed at IRIX 9. Quinn held his tag like a scalpel. Briggs read the etched name aloud, as if carving it into memory. Luther Kane swallowed his like a pill. Jake didn't speak. He didn't need to. The mission wasn't coded in any system. It wasn't sanctioned by any legal body. But every soldier, every AI, every intelligence node watching from Earth knew what was happening. The old wolves were being sent off the leash, and in the Cavor Empire's high halls, diplomatic chatter continued, oblivious to the quiet war now, rising beneath their feet. The Chancellor received updates on minor protests. The Senate debated trade levies. No one discussed the IRIX 9 incident, except to file it under closed matters. But deep in a black site far beyond Terran radar, a Cavor commander stared at a classified hologram. A satellite feed had picked up something impossible. 6 biosignatures long thought extinct, moving together, erasing every trail behind them. The commander stared at the footage, growing more pale with every second. "This can't be right," he whispered. Behind him, a lower-ranking analyst dared to ask, "What are they?" The commander didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice cracked. "They're not soldiers." The analyst blinked. "Then what are they?" "Answers," he said, "to a question we never should have asked." The signal cut. Far from the noise, deep within a stolen Imperial transport, Jake sat in silence. The others slept, cleaned their gear, or polished old weapons. He stared at Eleanor's ID photo, faded and creased. He folded it once, then again, then tucked it inside his jacket pocket where no fire could touch it. The Empire had made a mistake. They hadn't started a war. They'd unsealed a vault, and the monsters of Earth were walking again. The stolen Imperial dropship coasted through the dark vacuum beyond the Empire's inner ring patrols, its signal scrubbed, transponder neutralized, interior stripped of all insignias. It was a ghost now, just like its passengers. Inside, the 6 men prepared in silence, each lost in his own ritual. Jake stood near the viewport, watching the glow of the Empire's central capital world loom on the horizon, its lights a cruel reminder of the order that sanctioned massacre under the banner of diplomacy. Creed was already modifying the landing trajectory. His fingers moved with mechanical precision across the console, plotting a microburst descent that would bypass thermal scanners. Quinn was recalibrating his field medkit, though for him it was less about healing and more about improvisation. He slid in vials of synthesized adrenaline, nerve disruptors, and retroviral accelerants, muttering chemical ratios under his breath. Briggs assembled a gravity disruptor with parts that didn't match on paper. The weapon looked crude, borderline dysfunctional, but anyone who'd fought him before knew better than to question his craftsmanship. Miles sat motionless, rifle across his lap, tuning out the low hum of the ship. He had spoken 4 words since departure. Kane stood opposite him, cleaning a blade he'd smuggled out of an asteroid prison by embedding it into his femur. They weren't coordinated by rank or structure. There was no chain of command. Jake was the axis around which they turned not by appointment, but by something heavier than respect. Every man here had walked through the abyss. Jake had built a home inside it. Creed finally broke the silence. "We drop in the outer district. Minimal sensor sweep. It's a Class 7 security zone." Jake nodded. "Underground first. Hit the relay cores." Quinn grinned. "Cut the eyes before we blind 'em." Kane cracked his neck. "Then we butcher." "The lungs?" Briggs checked the charge on his weapon. "No broadcast, no warnings, in and out." Jake looked over the map Creed projected. "We're not here to make noise. We're here to erase their memory of power." The target wasn't a weapons facility. It wasn't a command post or fleet yard. It was the Empire's regulator citadel, a quiet compound where internal intelligence processed rebel identifiers, refugee scans, and humanitarian movements. It had authorized the purge of the IRIX 9 station. The names that signed the order, the biometrics that pressed the confirmation, were stored in vaults below. The Empire relied on clean erasure. They killed without residue. This team would break that pattern. The descent was surgical. Creed's modifications held. They breached airspace undetected, slid beneath the ion net, and landed in a utility trench 2 kilometers from the citadel. The city was a fortress in design but soft in confidence. No one expected infiltration this deep. No one ever had the audacity. That was their weakness. Jake moved first. Miles took rear, his scope sweeping buildings with mechanical patience. Quinn laid mines along the retreat path, tiny things disguised as pebbles, each loaded with sound-splitting shockwaves calibrated to burst eardrums before the body could react. Briggs hacked through the Citadel's substation like it owed him money. He rerouted power surges, collapsed internal lift protocols, and redirected all outbound traffic logs to a dead loop. Kane broke the entry gate with his shoulder and 2 calculated strikes to the anchor bolts. Inside, the Citadel's internal staff remained oblivious for 9 minutes, a delay purchased by the sheer impossibility of the act. They didn't kill the guards immediately. That wasn't the objective. Creed had strict instructions. Capture the ranking intel director. Get the signatures. Extract the purge orders. When they reached the data vault, the first resistance emerged. Auto turrets. Kane dismantled them manually, catching one round in the ribs and removing it with a flat glance. Miles took the next squad before they formed a triangle. No bullet missed. No sound traveled farther than the hallway. Quinn handled the extraction. The director, a mid-level Cavor official named Scythus Drell, stammered as Quinn strapped him into a zero-pain compliance chair and injected him with a cognitive accelerant. The drug didn't hurt. That wasn't Quinn's method. Instead, it made the truth irresistible. "Who signed the IRIX order?" Jake asked. Drell sobbed. "I don't know." Quinn adjusted the dosage. "Who issued the directive?" Drell blinked rapidly. "Minister Taven, Chancellor's chain." "But Military Council initiated." Jake leaned close. "Did you know it was medics?" Silence. Jake didn't blink. "Did you know?" Drell trembled. "We were told. Threats. Human pathogens. Weaponized organics." Quinn scoffed. "The only thing Eleanor Maddox weaponized was compassion." Briggs uploaded the data to an off-grid beacon stored inside Kane's arm. It would relay only once, triggered after extraction. It would send everything: names, files, holographs, and the last moments of 82 murdered peace workers. Thay, last defense, arrived too late. Imperial troopers swarmed the corridor outside the vault, activated perimeter lockdowns, and engaged suppression fields. Kane surged forward. He didn't fire. He disassembled their formation with bare hands and metal pieces. Creed covered him with controlled detonations placed hours prior in disguised access ports. Miles pinned the squad leaders through armored walls. They reached the roof before the central AI could activate drone deployment. The exfiltration was brutal. The Empire's pride turned to panic. Troopers shouted in 6 dialects, unsure whether they were being invaded or hallucinating. In 5 minutes, they lost command, surveillance, and centralized access to all internal files. In 7, the Citadel's entire intelligence core was offline, not deleted. Taken, Jake boarded last. He looked back only once. Drell's face was burned into his memory now. Not because of pain, because of cowardice. Back aboard the ship, Creed initiated a deep jump sequence. It would take them to the next target, a listening array near the Kalari Nebula, known for intercepting unregistered medical communications. It had flagged IRIX-9's outgoing distress call and never forwarded it. Another nail, another name, another step. Jake held the extracted files in his hands. Drell's biometric data, the approval chain, mission clearance labeled as humanitarian preemptive containment. All lies, all sanctioned. Quinn glanced over his shoulder. "What's next?" Jake answered without looking up. "We show them what? It means when monsters remember who made them." None of the 6 smiled. There was no joy in this, only purpose. They didn't fight to survive. They fought because the dead couldn't. The operation had reached its crescendo. Jake could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable, as the team prepared for the final push. The mission was close to completion, but there was no room for error. Each step, each decision, would determine whether this moment would lead to victory or disaster. The weight of it all pressed down on him like an unbearable pressure, yet his mind remained focused. They had come too far to fail now. Jake glanced over at his team, each one of them laser-focused on their task. Creed, as always, was quiet, his eyes scanning the data feeds with the precision of a master technician. The man could break into anything. If there was a crack in the Empire's armor, Creed would find it. Quinn, on the other hand, exuded an air of readiness that bordered on impatience. His hands never stopped moving, whether he was prepping his weapons or adjusting his gear. He didn't like waiting, didn't like the idea of being idle, but that was part of his charm. Always in motion, always expecting the next challenge. Miles was methodical. His every movement was a calculated decision. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. Kane, still the stoic warrior, stood at the ready, prepared for anything. They were the perfect team, each member bringing their unique skills to the table. As the countdown ticked down, Jake felt his heart rate quicken. This was it. The station they were infiltrating was the last stronghold in the galaxy for the Empire's communications network. If they could breach it, destroy the data, and send the message, it would cripple the Empire's ability to maintain its grip on the galaxy. Jake had never been more certain of anything in his life. The stakes were higher than ever, but they were ready. He knew they were. The team moved as one, like a well-rehearsed machine. Creed was the first to breach the system, his fingers dancing over the console as he accessed the station's internal network. Within seconds, they were in. Quinn and Briggs took point, clearing the way as they moved deeper into the facility. The sound of boots echoing off metal floors filled the air as they advanced, their synchronized movements a testament to years of experience. They were unstoppable, but the Empire wasn't going to just let them waltz in and out unchallenged. The first wave of resistance hit like a tidal wave. Guards, stationed at every corner and behind every door, flooded the halls. They had been expecting trouble, but this was more than they had anticipated. Quinn grinned, his hand flying to his sidearm, his voice low and confident. "I was hoping for a warm-up." He didn't waste time. A single shot, precise and deliberate, took down the first guard. Miles and Kane flanked him, pushing forward as the sound of gunfire filled the air. Each blast was a punctuation mark, signaling the growing intensity of the battle. Jake's mind was elsewhere, focused on the larger picture. He didn't have time to dwell on the small skirmishes happening around him. He had a mission to complete. They all did. As Creed worked tirelessly to break through the station's final layer of encryption, Jake's thoughts drifted back to the reason they were here. The Empire had taken everything from them: their people, their homes, their way of life. It had to end. Today, the truth had to be exposed. It wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about redemption, about making sure that those who had been oppressed by the Empire knew the truth, that they knew someone had fought for them. But it wasn't all about heroism. There were no illusions here. They weren't saints, and they weren't out to save the galaxy. They were out to stop the Empire, to strike back against a force that had shown no mercy. They had become the instruments of vengeance, whether they liked it or not. There was no going back now. As the minutes ticked by, the team fought there, way deeper into the heart of the station. Every hallway was a new battlefield, every room a potential trap. They encountered resistance at every turn, but they pressed forward, driven by a shared sense of purpose. Creed's voice crackled over the comms. "We're in. I'm sending the signal now." Jake felt a sense of relief wash over him. The core had been accessed. The message was on its way. It wouldn't be long before the galaxy learned the truth, before the Empire's lies were laid bare for all to see. But even as that thought settled in his mind, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was too much silence in the aftermath. The guards had stopped firing. The hum of activity that had once filled the station had died down. It was too quiet. Before he could process the thought, the ship's internal alarms blared, signaling a lockdown. The door they had entered through slammed shut, trapping them inside. The sound of rapid footsteps echoed through the walls. They were not alone. Jake's pulse quickened. The Empire had anticipated their move. They had been waiting for them. A trap. A deadly one at that. As the first wave of reinforcements poured into the room, the team found themselves surrounded. The Empire had adapted faster than they had expected. But even with their backs against the wall, the team didn't hesitate. Quinn smirked, reaching for another grenade. "Well, I guess the party's just getting started." His words were a momentary distraction, but they gave the team a chance to regroup. Jake glanced at his comrades, their faces set with determination. There was no way out, not through the front lines at least. But there was another way. He had no idea if it would work, but it was their only chance. He turned to Creed. "Can you override the system and send the message from here?" Creed didn't look up from his station, but his voice was steady. "Already on it." Jake nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't have time to wait for the system to break down, though. The walls were closing in. The reinforcements were coming faster than they could handle. Without another word, he sprinted toward the control panel, his mind working faster than his feet could carry him. He slammed his fist into the interface, initiating a bypass override. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had. The lights flickered again, the station's power grid sputtering as the override took hold. Creed's voice was louder this time. "Jake, get back!" He wasn't sure what Creed was seeing, but Jake trusted him. He knew that whatever it was, it wouldn't be good. And then the room erupted in chaos. A massive shockwave rippled through the walls, and the entire facility trembled. The message was sent. The mission was complete. The galaxy would know the truth, and the Empire's reign was over. The team had won. But Jake knew better than to think the battle was over. The war had only just begun.